just let you know a little bit about Dani Robinson. She's a mother of two and a sales executive in the upscale beauty industry. In 2004, she was shot 5 times at point-blank range in front of her 2- and 4-year-old daughters by their father. Though last rites were read over her in the hospital, Dani was determined to survive for her daughters. She shares her story now in hopes that it will educate and empower. Her goal is to make this a safer world for her 2 daughters and for all women. Thank you, Dani and Holly.
Thank you. We decided to do this conversational style because I'm really proud. This is one of my best friends in the world. And she was there when my brother was shot, and I never in a million years imagined that one day she would be shot. But she's never told her story before, and this is her very first time sharing her story, so I wanted to be here with her and just sort of let it be a little more conversational. So I know that your shooting took place on December 23rd, 2002, and I thought what would be helpful for everyone at this conference to know is what she had done before then to try to protect herself. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yes. I was in a relationship with my daughter's father. Oh, okay. Sorry. Never spoken to a microphone before. Anyways, it was a very unhealthy relationship. He was not physically abusive to me, but he was emotionally abusive. After my daughter was born, he just became a monster. I ended up having another baby with him. I stayed with him because I was going to change him as well. And after my little baby was born, about a year and a half, I decided that I was done with him. Just going over many things that were brought up today, I did go through the emotions with him where he was trying to push my family away from me, and he was trying to, he didn't want me to have friends. He didn't want me to go to work. He wanted me to stay home and be a stay-at-home mother, and that's not what I wanted to do. So after a good year and a half of this on and off relationship with him, I decided that I was going to leave. And I had left before a few times. This time I was serious about it. And my grandfather came over to pick me up at my house while he sat there and screamed and yelled at me for being such a bitch and a whore. And I left. And I stayed with my grandfather for a couple days. And I tried to have a relationship with him as good as I could. He was angry, he was mad, and he was always tearing me down. So one day I was driving, and he told me that nobody was ever going to have me. And he told me that he would make sure that nobody ever had me. And I had said to him, I said, you're sounding, you kind of freaked me out a little bit, like, are you saying you're going to get a gun? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you can't get a gun because, I think I'd served him a restraining order already. That's what it was, sorry. And he said, well, you'd be amazed at what you can find on the street. And that blew me away when he said that, because he was a white boy from Philadelphia, and as white as they could be. He would never talk about bringing anything up from the streets. And I thought, okay, something's going on. I know he's doing something. So I ended up going home and telling my grandfather and my sisters, he's up to something. And they're like, no, he's just trying to scare you. He's just trying to scare you. And I said, no, he's not. I know he's up to something. So I think, that's when I went. Sorry if I'm a little up and down with it. I did go and get a restraining order the next morning. And prior to that, I had called West Valley PD, and I spoke to an officer there. And I told him, I said, I just left my boyfriend. He's been a terror with me. And he basically said he was going to be getting a gun. And he said, well, he didn't threaten you, so there's nothing we can really do. And I said, but I know this guy, and he said he was going to do something. And everybody just kind of, pushed it off. So I served him. I went to the police station, Van Nuys, and he was served the next morning at 6 a.m. And at that time, domestic violence took precedence over anything else. And I knew he'd be home at 6 a.m. in the morning getting ready for work. So he was served at that time. A couple days later, it was Christmas time, I was working and I went to go pick up my daughters. And I hadn't heard from him. It was quiet. It was nice. And I go pick up my daughters from my mother's, and I was driving back to my grandfather's because I was staying with him. And I pulled up into the driveway and I saw my grandfather's head bopping around because he always made us dinner, and it was really cold out. And I opened up my car, I got out of my car, I had a white Ford, and when I got out, all of a sudden I felt like this wind, like this all of a sudden, I don't know what it was, but just something came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it was him. And he was right next to me in my car while I was getting my daughters out of the back seat, and they were both still in car seats. And I just remember this big black gun in his hand. And I had said to him, I said, what are you doing? You can't be here. I'm like, that naive, you can't be here. And he said, well, I can do whatever I want. You just gave me a piece of paper and that's it. So he said hello to my girls, and he made me walk down the street with him, just walking outside. And I just remember looking inside and seeing my grandfather, and he always came out to help me get the girls out of their car seats. And I just kept praying, please, don't walk outside, don't walk outside. So as he said hello to my daughters, he took me and he started walking me just a couple doors down. And he just was mumbling this weird stuff about whatever was going on in his brain. And all of a sudden, he told me that I had to go with him. And all of a sudden, this white van appeared. And he opened it up. And I just remember the sliding of those old vans. He picked me up and told me I had to go with him. And I said, no, I'm not going with you. And I started to fight him. And as I screamed and fought, the gun went off 2 times. I believe one went through my arm and the other one hit me in the back of my hip. And at that time, I had fallen to the ground, and he stood over me, and I just remember being on the ground and saying, why? Why are you doing this? And he stood over me and he shot me 3 more times in the abdomen. And at that point, he took off in the van, he went away. The police came, the ambulance came, and I ended up in Holy Cross Hospital. You want to talk a little bit more about that experience?
Well, I thought it would be an important thing to bring up how he had gotten the gun, because he tried to buy a gun, but he wasn't able to, so people might want to know how he actually got it.
Okay, well, he was served the restraining order, and I knew that I didn't know if he had a gun or not at that point, but the gun that he used on me was a .357 Magnum with hollow points. You guys know what hollow points are. I should not be here. Then I had found out a couple weeks later that he had actually purchased a gun at our local gun shop 3 days before he was served. So he had planned this. This was all a plan. It was going to be a murder-suicide, because we did eventually find his suicide notes. There were 2 of them. Yeah, his suicide notes.
So first he tried to buy the gun, but it was the waiting period, right?
Right, so he couldn't get the gun. So the antique gun that he used on me, he was dating some girl and he conned it from her and told him that he was going like duck hunting or something in the lake. Yes, so that's what was used. And they never recovered the gun. We don't know what ever happened to it.
This is why I wish, if anybody in here has, maybe the police officers in the back could speak to this. She did the right things. She reported it. She called the police when she was being threatened. She got the restraining order. You know, I don't know what we could have done more to protect her, and maybe we could open that up to some comments and questions. If anyone has questions about Dani's story as well.
Well, I just know that just from my experience of handling some cases, ourselves, I think that, to some degree, it is a piece of paper, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is safe. Fortunately for us, we have at least partnered with advocacy organizations in all 21 police stations, and many of them have safety plans that they share with survivors. So I think that in a lot of ways is a key component. Put themselves in situations that, where they're not vulnerable. But in many stories and incidents like your own that have been shared with me over the years, there are some situations, unfortunately, that are just, they just happen and the police are just not there and so forth. So.
And then Dani, did you also want to say what happened to him?
Oh, well, he is right now, he's serving 5 years. Unfortunately, I settled on a plea bargain. He had a personal attorney, and they really did manipulate the system for a few years where he was just in and out of, he went to Patton State Hospital because they were going to claim that he was insane. He ended up he was in Twin Towers for a while. He was in the Hole for a while. He was in Men's Central Jail, and he'd go in and out of the courthouse there. And unfortunately, my father passed away, and I was taking care of my dad's grandfather, my dad's father, my grandfather. And I just, at the time, I just didn't know how I could handle going through a trial. So my DA at the time had said, well, let's do a plea bargain. He'll get 25 years and deal with him for 25 years. And well, 25 years are almost up right now.
It's on.
Is it on? Okay. I have worked with the Domestic Violence Task Force in Atlanta, where I'm from. And we found that monitoring the perpetrator when they get a temporary restraining order or a permanent restraining order, putting an ankle monitor on them and their proximity to the victim puts the onus on the perpetrator and not the victim. The victim is alerted when they're a certain distance away. The police is alerted. Also having like a 3-day hold on perpetrators after they're served with the restraining order gives the victim time to relocate, to go through that safety plan. That's vital because leaving is the most dangerous time. Those are 2 things I can think of.
Thank you for sharing your story. I'm wondering, you said that your husband got the gun from a girlfriend, and this is maybe too long to have any knowledge of, but do you have any knowledge of her background, how easy it was for her to obtain a gun?
I knew that she was in law enforcement somehow. The gun was an antique and it was her grandfather's. And I know that when he conned her out of it and he was out stalking me, she was stalking him just to try to get her gun back. Because he told her, I'm going duck hunting. And that's how he got it. She was never charged with anything.
But didn't she still support him, like show up at court and
Yeah.
like, support
Yeah,
him
she
and was on
showed
his
up.
side?
Yeah.
Obviously, she didn't have the gun locked.
No.
And I guess I'm wondering, the gun they never found the gun.
Yeah, they never found the gun that he took from her.
Suspect.
Yeah.
Dani, how did you know that this was a time when you could finally tell your story to a group?
Well, Holly's been a part of Women Against Gun Violence for many years, and I always participate in all her functions, and I'm very supportive. I did go through the shooting of her brother when we were 12, 13 years old. I experienced that, and Margot had reached out to me a few times and said, when you're ready, we'll do it. And when I found out it was going to be about domestic violence, I knew immediately that this is where I could share my story, because of course, ultimately identified with domestic violence.
Thank you. We want this to be a forum for conversation. How are your children now?
Oh, my girls are great. I have my 19-year-old daughter's with me right now.
Thank you for being here.
An amazing child. And I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old in class right now, and my girls are amazing.
She's an amazing mom.
Yeah,
she did it all by
they're
herself.
I grew up in a very physical and emotionally abusive home. My mom and dad were crazy, but we are happy and we're good and we love each other and we surround ourselves with just love, and it's all here.
And where did the support come for you after the incident?
Well, I went into counseling through West Valley Police Department. They had hooked me up with somebody, and I went to counseling for a while, but then it was hard for me to go. I felt like I had to get back to my normal life. I wasn't, I just had to get back to my normal life. And I did have my daughters in counseling for many years, and here I am now.
Resilient. Thank you so much. So it's lunchtime.